The experiences of Asian Americans in the United States is as varied as the cultures and histories of the diverse nations that are encompassed in the term Asian American. We begin this film by focusing on the experiences of Southeast Asian Americans in the United States. In the decade after 1975, an influx of Southeast Asian refugees arrived in the United States. This was the first time in American history where so many people from the same region arrived in such a short span of time. They came to escape the tragedies and bloodshed of war in their native countries of Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, seeking the promise of Western democracy and perhaps the ability to attain the ever-elusive American dream. They crossed rivers, through jungles, and across seas towards an uncertain future. 41 years later, here are their stories.
My name is Rachel. I'm first year at Walter College, and I was born and raised in Jakarta, Indonesia. But I went to boarding school in California for 3 years before I came to Wellesley. In the first place, I didn't see a lot of Southeast Asians in my school. I saw a lot more East Asians. I know a lot of them work very, very hard to do really well, but I also know a bunch of people who do slack off or like not as well. They try very hard. I think you can see really that their educational background is really lacking because they were not provided the same like education opportunities. I wouldn't consider myself one of those people who like struggled very hard, but I definitely did struggle because the education system was different as number one. I think a lot of Southeast Asian countries follow the education system of East Asian countries, so it's a lot of rote memory, but America really wants Americans or North Americans just generally want you to understand the concept, and I think it's something that's hard to break through. But going back to the model minority question, I think it's very false to assume that Southeast Asians are all people who are innately smart and capable, because a lot of them want to pursue other careers that are maybe not stereotypical of the East Asian or Southeast Asian or Asians in general. Like they want to pursue a career in sports. I know in Indonesia a lot of people, badminton is a very popular sport, and so Southeast Asians want to pursue that kind of lifestyle and job as a professional athlete. And I think that's one thing that not a lot of Americans or just white people in general consider in the Western world, that Asians also want to pursue a career in something other than finance or medicine. When I was in high school, there was this girl, and she was a junior at the time and I was a sophomore, and I just had gotten into high school, so I knew little about college admissions process. I didn't know anything about affirmative action until it was made aware to me what it was about. And so we were walking with this girl and she was talking to her friend. She abruptly turns to me and says, "Hey Rachel, if you apply as a Pacific Islander," which I was not, but it was just assumed that I was a Pacific Islander, that I would get into basically any college I wanted because they need to fill in a quota for affirmative action and whatnot. I thought that was very shocking to me because just the fact that where I'm geographically located, even though it's a false assumption that I'm a Pacific Islander, which Indonesians are not, just the fact that I'm based on a certain geographic region gives me more of am of a certain race, gives me more of an advantage over other people who may have the same capabilities as me. It invalidates how hard I've worked to get here. It invalidates all the time spent working very hard to get a certain grade, to do extracurriculars. Everything that I've done has just been invalidated just by the fact that I happen to be of a certain nationality, of a certain race, of something that I couldn't control. It felt like some people may consider it a privilege, but I think it's just very offensive when you call it a privilege, because at the same time we face other discriminations that are not recognized immediately.
For 10 years after 1975, 100,000 Southeast Asians per year streamed into the U.S. The exact population, though, is different to know for sure due to interstate migration. Refugees would live in camps in Asia for at least 6 months to hone their English skills and gain basic knowledge of American society before they settled in the U.S. American families, usually affiliated with area churches, would then sponsor them. Once settled, the refugees in turn sponsored their friends and family from Southeast Asia, who entered the country as immigrants. Most refugees face difficulties in assimilation. Due to their experiences in wartime in their native countries in Southeast Asia, many continue to suffer flashbacks, nightmares, and severe depression. These new refugees also faced significant economic barriers to success due to their lack of knowledge of the English language and the lack of transferable job skills.
My name is Irene Chow. I am a Malaysian. I grew up my whole life in Malaysia. I am of Chinese descent, so I am Malaysian Chinese, and I'm currently studying in Middlebury College in Vermont in the States. Southeast Asian Americans, I suppose, East Asians, Chinese especially, have been in America for a pretty long time now, and so they've, pretty much established a community, and there are a lot of second generation, I suppose, Asian Americans or East Asian Americans who are really well off just because their family has really laid the kind of the basic foundation to excel in life. And I think, most Southeast Asian Americans, I'm guessing from Vietnam, came over, and I don't think they've built a very strong community with strong social and political clout yet. This might change in the future, I'm not sure, but in the meantime, I think that poverty rates are still pretty high just because the lack of community and the lack of social clout to bring change or demand change for themselves.
Southeast Asians in Asia, and they do face discrimination even within their own, even within the Asian regions. So if you go to countries like Hong Kong or Singapore, and you mention Indonesia or Malaysia or Philippines, the first thing that they have in mind is not what's a capital city or a national monument. It's a domestic helper. And so a lot of people in Hong Kong and Singapore have domestic helpers from these countries, and so it has become a stereotype that if you are from Indonesia, I suppose, that you are associated with these people who work as domestic helpers. I know a bunch of other instances because it's been published online on media and whatnot, but mostly the ones that have been published are obviously not the good types of things. It's mostly just what these people have done wrong, negative stereotypes in general.
Living conditions were often substandard, especially in urban neighborhoods. Refugees did their best to adapt to the situations at hand. As Asian Americans are usually categorized into a homogeneous group, it may be difficult to see the tougher challenges Southeast Asians currently face compared to their Asian counterparts. These experiences have contributed to a culture of systematic oppression towards Southeast Asian Americans in the educational and social arena. This discrimination is sometimes even brought on by their Asian counterparts.
So my name is Ryan. I'm from Indonesia, but I'm full-blood Chinese, third or fourth generation there. And I studied for 6 years in Singapore for secondary school, basically middle and high school. So I moved here to Boston just for university, and I'm currently in Boston University. So I was at my roommate's sister's house party. He invited me there. And so we were playing this trivia game, and me and him were a team. Right? Okay, so the question is, what is a country with a red and white flag? Of course I said Indonesia, because it's my country, man, red and white. I mean, it could be Japan or whatever, but it's Indonesia, it's my country. Then my roommate Gavin, he was like, you should have known. He's Chinese, but he's ABC. So I got the answer wrong. The answer turned out to be Singapore. Then he was like, you should have known. And I was like, I'm representing my country. Then he's like, but you studied there for 6 years. But I'm like, I'm representing my country. I'm just representing my country. And then what he said nobody gives a shit about you or your country. I wanted to punch him, but I was still staying in his house, and I was a nice guy, so I just moved away and walked away.
Southeast Asian Americans have shown an incredible resiliency and the ability to overcome, even when presented with a tumultuous history. They have rebuilt their lives brick by brick, showing their children that it is possible to overcome. Yet Southeast Asian Americans continue to struggle with unmet needs that are often glossed over due to the model minority myth as it is often applied to Asians of all backgrounds. One way to ensure Southeast Asian American children of the next generation are able to realize their potential, providing quality and equitable educational opportunities will allow them to break out of their barriers to success.